Good morning. Oh, just cut into the afternoon. For those of you that I haven't worked with already, my name is Karen Coyle. I'm based over in New York. I've been there for the last couple of years. So what I'm going to do here today is probably the same format if you've been to the other market presentations. Just to start off with a little bit of overview on the US market and what's the current environment there at the moment. Then just focusing a little bit into the key trends within both the retail and the food service industry. And then I suppose really getting into the nuts and bolts of what you should consider about the US market if you're looking to target the market. So just for my benefit, who already in the room here is already selling into the US market? Anybody already? Okay. And may I also ask then, just in general, what sectors you're in? Anybody in the dairy sector? Packaged consumer goods? So, you know, ambient products on shelf? Is that what I'm getting the bulk of most people? Okay. Any liquor? Liquor, no? Okay, that just gives me a sense. So I'm reckoning that most of you are potentially ambient goods in the packaged area into retail? Okay. And food service. Okay, that just gives me a little steer on it. Okay, well, let's kick off. And I think as well, probably the best thing is if you've got questions, perhaps we'll just bring them we'll leave them towards the end, if that suits everybody. Okay, now, to give you an idea, can everybody see that slide there? Okay, so just to give you an idea of the US, and I suppose even before we look at it in figures, and I know this may sound very trivial, but again, when you think of the US, you've got to remember we're talking about a continent here. We're talking about 50 individual countries per se, with very different tastes, with in many cases different legislation when it comes to food. And how it's sold and how it's regulated. So unfortunately, it's not one size suits all in the US. What's the market over on the East Coast is very different to the market down on the South, where there's perhaps a stronger Hispanic influence, very different to the market on the West Coast, which is very natural orientated, but also very Asian influenced over there, versus the Midwest, which is very traditional in its food taste. Now, all of this. So bear in mind, as I say, when you're looking at the States, and if you're coming to talk with us at any stage as we go forward in our conversations, we will often say, okay, let's figure on a market for you, a geographic market for you. So as I say, just look at it in terms of it is a large country. But in terms of the figures, to give you an idea, I mean, you know, their GDP is nearly 15 trillion. It's the largest economy in the world, with a population of 310 million, which is still growing. But interestingly, where the growth in the population is coming from in the States is from the Hispanic community, which is having an increasing influence in all things in the States, the language, but also in the food culture as well. Unemployment, I mean, I know by our standards, maybe under 10%, you know, looks good, but for the Americans, that is a serious problem for the last 18 months. For them, an unemployment rate at 9% is very disconcerting for them, and something that is always on the news at the moment. Now, in terms of the food spend, it accounts for about 13% of the household budget at the moment. And of that, and again, you know, when we talk about the States, it is such a developed food service market and out-of-home market that we've broken it down. About that accounts for about 8% is what they buy in retail to eat at home, and about 5% is out of home. So you can almost see the balance there in terms of spend. In terms of the market from an Irish point of view, it would be our fifth, it veers between our fourth and our fifth largest export market. We're just over $500 million. Last year, we grew at 11%. The first 5 months of this year is showing our exports to the US up 16%. So it is an excellent market for us. I should say, though, to give an idea, at the moment, the breakdown of sales into the US from Ireland is 70% alcohol, 20% dairy, and 10% everything else. And we'll come to that in a second because it is a challenging market. And really, I think what we'll get a sense of here today is that while it is a wonderful long-term market, it is a wonderfully loyal market, it takes a lot of time to gain traction in the US. It takes a lot of focus and time investment, and because of that, it can be very challenging basically to get your sales there. But if you do stick with it, super market. But as I say, that just gives an idea. And again, we're always talking about the exchange rate as well, because it has an influence depending on when you're doing your pricing and that. So we've been up and down. In the 3 years that I've been in the States, I've seen the exchange rate go from 129 up to 160 in those 3 years, which is quite a considerable fluctuation. But what the experts are saying at the moment is that they reckon that this year it'll be in around 140, 141 for the euro. That's as good as best that they can say at this stage. I should say, just in general, probably everybody's been over to visit the States, or has family there and kind of knows the vibes of what's going on there at the moment. But just to give you a sense of the sentiment there at the moment. If we were here, 9-12 months ago, I would have said, yeah, the States is coming through. I'm really starting to feel, a positiveness about people's attitudes, being the eternal optimist. The Americans are great at seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And definitely earlier this year, we were really getting that sense coming through in all the media and just out there, like the reports back in from the supermarkets, who really would have a finger on the pulse of where money is starting to free up and all of that. Unfortunately, in the last 3 months, things have got very negative again, and there's a lot of uncertainty in the market in terms of consumer sentiment. A lot of uncertainty in the market. The market is staying really sluggish. There's talk about double dip, but I think that's more media than anything else. But it definitely is a sluggish market. Consumers are nervous, and we understand that there's a lot of money sloshing around the economy. It's just that people are afraid to spend it. But I mean, I suppose that's pretty well all our economies at the moment. But definitely it is, they're not too far ahead of us, I would say, in terms of their sentiment. So, just bear that in mind. That being said, there's still a lot of money out there. It is a huge market. And for a lot of us selling in from Ireland, at where we're pitching ourselves and where there's a demand for our products, that demand is still there. They're saying that really the people with the money still have a lot of money over there, and that people at the higher income groups are feeling a lot more confident about spending their money. Where the challenge is down in the more the people on the more industrial wage and the lower income groups. That's where there's a lot of pain. But in the big cities and all of that, there's still a lot of money around, and money for imported products and for food products. Okay, so then speaking of that, looking at the retail sector in the US, and a couple of key points about what's happening out there at the moment. The value of the grocery retail market in the US is at this stage well over $500 million, or $500 billion. When you think of it that way. In fact, the total market is over $1 trillion between food service and retail. So, it's a huge market, huge market. And really what's happening within is, and maybe I should preface it by saying, for those that don't know the US market, it's very, very similar in structure to what you're used to here in Ireland or the UK or Europe. You've got all the various different retailers. You've got the specialty retailers, you've got the mainstream supermarkets, you've got the discount type of stores, you've got the club stores. On the retail side of things, you've got online sales. So really, you know, to be honest, there's a tremendous familiarity within the overall structure for anybody that's operating and dealing with the trade over here or in the UK. It's just that the numbers are vast. You know, you're talking about, you know, over 100,000 retail stores. You're talking about 200 mainstream supermarkets. You're talking about the likes of Walmart having 3,500 stores. So it's just that everything is just bigger and more numbers. But, you know, really at the end of the day, you don't really have to worry about that from a point of view. It's the same principle of how the market is structured and how they do business. And similarly in food service. But within the retail sector, to give you an idea then, who's doing well, who's perhaps having challenges. Similar to over here, this side of the Atlantic, the discount sector has definitely done well out of recession. And in the States, it's more like they're more called dollar stores. So this is really where it's all about price and all about value. And they have definitely done well. And like what happens in recessions, people have gone in to shop, found that they like what they see on offer, and even if things get a little bit better, it's going to have shifted purchasing habits tremendously. So definitely they're doing well within the overall market. Private label has also done significantly well out of the recession in the US and over the challenging economy over the last couple of years. And bear in mind that this, up until a couple of years ago, unlike Ireland and the UK, the retailers in the US hadn't really invested in private label. They were way, way behind us in terms of their strategy on it. But they have absolutely taken from what the key retailers have done in Europe. And they've all now introduced their own private label, and in many cases the tiered private label, like you would see over here, the more premium end, the mainstream, and then the more value offer. And every single retailer of any size and note has got their full range of private label. And when you're coming new into them, they will try to move you into private label, understand it. They will try to get it as a private label offer because obviously that is going to add value to their business and to their brand. Sometimes that's the right thing to do for certain categories. Sometimes what it does is, depending on the category and the retailer, it means that you've less investment because listing fees are a part of the business in the US. To get your products listed on shelf if it's in a busy category. So definitely private label can be the right approach for some people. And when you think that the private label for some of the retailers, like Whole Foods, like Trader Joe's, like Wegmans, people like Dean and DeLuca, people that are actually at the premium end of the retail business, you know, it can actually be a very valid and opportune way to get into their system and to develop your experience of the US market. But now at this stage, private label sales are up around 20%, and that's huge by American standards. And it is going to continue to grow because the investment is definitely there by the retailers. Convenience is another area that is growing very strongly in the US and really would have started, I suppose, in many respects when Tesco entered the market a couple of years ago with its Fresh and Easy offer. I mean, up until then, the market in the States had been very much kind of driven by the Walmarts of this world, the big, huge box-type stores, which sell everything but have huge, just huge space out of town. But now, as I say, more and more of them are opening up convenience stores. Even Walmart now is just about, or has just launched its a retail, convenience offer into retail. So smaller stores, and again, it's the long-term demographic changes of smaller family sizes, smaller households, and 2 people working outside the home. So that is set to continue. And likewise, urban shopping. Again, when you think of the States, you might think of these huge, big out-of-town malls. Well, of course, gas prices has been, you know, on the news so much that when it hits $4 a gallon, everybody goes a bit mad, the price of gas. And it definitely has affected people's travelling patterns and habits. So instead of going out of town and that, there's a lot of people buying then more locally. So again, like what we would have seen here, more trends back towards urban shopping. And that is done well for the smaller specialist store and the smaller neighbourhood stores. So that's again what's happening there. In terms of the products, health, wellness, functional foods, that whole area continues to grow and grow and grow in the US. And again, when you think about it, their health concerns, the level of obesity, the level of diabetes. You cannot turn on the TV and they're talking now about the not just cholesterol or whatever, but diabetes is definitely such a big topic over there. And again, I suppose a lot of it's coming from the very fact as well with the healthcare system that, you know, they're struggling to, and they will struggle to be able to look after the healthcare of such a vast population. And the way if people aren't going to get healthier, that's obviously going to be a huge burden on society. Again, I don't think there's anything that any of us couldn't imagine resonating. So the whole area of health, wellness and functional foods is definitely an area that's getting more and more focus, both in terms of being talked about on the media and in terms of the products that's offered in the store and in terms of the consumers looking for these kind of products. So and there you see kind of points of difference. There you can actually get more premium pricing. So you're not playing just in the mainstream category. And likewise, natural, organic and specialty foods, of which a lot of the imported products are still growing out there. And let me talk a little bit further about those, just that you understand perhaps the definition. In the States, natural is a product that is usually free from any artificial colours, flavourings. It's, you know, if it's animal-based, if it's from dairy or meat, it hasn't been fed hormones. It's hormone-free, it's basically what we might take as a regular product out in the supermarket here, but in the States, that is regarded as natural. And so you've got mainstream products, and then higher above that, the premium end, you've got natural products. And people like Whole Foods would actually be a natural type retailer. Organic is exactly as we're aware of it over here. Again, that really is, again, a very small section and a premium priced section above organic. But let me just flag up one thing to you. If you are organic accredited here in the EU, you need to get USDA accreditation to call yourself organic in the US. Your accreditation over here from Europe is not recognised. Technically, under their labelling regulations, you cannot call yourself organic. You have to be accredited by the US Department of Agriculture. So for some people, it's rarely a challenge in terms of your ability to achieve the organic standards. It's more in terms of time, paperwork and cost to do it. But technically, you are not supposed to have the word organic on your label if it is not organic under the US system. There has been discussions over the last 3 to 4 years about equivalence, that if you've got a recognised standard in Europe for organic, then that you will be recognised as organic in the US and vice versa, but nothing has come to fruition on that yet, and that would be the ideal situation, but still out there. And specialty foods, and it's interesting, when I first went over, I used to always say speciality, but in the States they actually call it specialty foods. Specialty foods is really Again, as I say, your premium, your indulgent, your gourmet, your typically imported foods, again at the premium price. And stores like Dean and DeLuca, for example, in the States would be a specialty retailer. Garden of Eden, there's a couple of chains like that would actually be very much in that space. As I say, Whole Foods would be in the natural space. And the great thing about specialty food stores or retailers or those sections within the supermarkets is they're typically imported. Because they're imported, they've had to take on the logistics cost, they've had to take on the tariffs, the importation tariffs cost, the importer margin cost, and as such, price is usually quite high, but at least then if it's from Spain, France, Italy, Ireland, at least you're all operating pretty well within the same price space. Rather than competing direct for somebody who's just from 50 miles down the road and hasn't had all of those extra costs. So specialty tends to be imported, not necessarily, but tends to be. And very much there is a market there. These are particularly the Americans who have traveled a lot, the gourmet consumers, the foodies. They've usually gone around the world and they've been to places and they want to recreate perhaps their experience of being in Ireland or being in Italy or being in France. And the other great thing I would say about the Americans is because of all the cultures over there, they have a great openness to new products and new tastes. Because they have such a cosmopolitan experience of ethnic influences over there. So, they're great that way. They will try new products and try them. And as I say, that's why it does well on the imported side. Looking at food service, again, the food service market is just at the moment shy of the retail market. The split is somewhere around 51% retail in terms of food spend, 49% food service. And to give you an idea, there are over 1 million food service outlets in the US. Anywhere that sell food outside the home, over 1 million. But despite that, it's actually an area and it's a sector that has very little ongoing figures and facts research about it, probably just because the sheer size of it. But definitely the recession has impacted tremendously on the food service sector. I mean, the Americans were so used to, like what we got here in the last couple of years here, of going out and eating, 1 or 2 meals a day outside the home, grabbing their coffee, going to Starbucks in the morning to get your coffee, and then Starbucks brought in porridge or oatmeal, and people eating out at lunchtime or eating out at dinner at night and taking your whatever you've got left over back home. Just par for the course over in the States. But definitely the recession impacted how often people have gone out, where they go out, and what kind of level of food service restaurant they go to, and what they order. They might have had 2 courses, now they might just have 1 course. They might used to have the sides, the bolt-on sides, and now they don't have that. So they have been definitely cutting back. And because just of the sheer size of the market, some have done well out of it and some have definitely felt the pain. And just as broad brushstrokes here, as a result of the session, interestingly enough, burger chains, unless you're McDonald's, the burger chains have really, really done poorly in the last couple of years. But McDonald's have just managed to reinvent their offer, reinvent their menu, reinvent their promotional offer, introduced oatmeal in the morning. They've been clever, and they are doing very well. But the likes of Burger King and the likes of some of the other well-known burger chains have definitely suffered in the last couple of years. Coffee chains. Starbucks did very poorly at one stage during it because people went like, well, look at how much I'm spending on coffee every morning or twice a day. But interestingly, Starbucks, who celebrated their 40 years this year, have actually now pulled themselves back and are starting to show really, really good returns for the last 2 or 3 quarters. So it looks like they might have be rebounding. I mean, there's been a lot of recalibration by people and in what their offer is and where their position is, and maybe going back to the basics that they might have dropped, as they were successful over the years. you know, instead of just opening up more and more and more outlets, stopped the new openings, you know, and really retrenched a little bit. Casual dining, some of the chains, again in the casual dining, have suffered in the terms that people might have eaten out there twice a month. Now they're just eating out once a month. And white tablecloth, as you would imagine, in certain parts of the country, definitely did badly, as people kind of wanted to go out, but they actually didn't go maybe to the steakhouse anymore. They might have then, you know, gone to more of a casual dining that was offering the steak there. So, you know, there's definitely been a lot of pain. Pizza chains have done particularly well. Domino's, Pizza Hut continue to go from strength to strength. And the quick casual area, whereby you are served the food, you've got a wide menu, a lot of promotional offers, you know, 2 adults eat and the kids go free. This kind of, you know, these kind of chains, they have done well as well. And really what's operating restaurant operators' minds at the moment is really looking at their cost efficiencies. They really are putting pressure back on the distributors and back then onto the suppliers to see where they can actually keep their costs down in terms of food costs, particularly with food inflation at the moment and it continuing to grow now. But they're very definitely about delivering value for the consumer coming in, like, as I say, the deals and the offers, using social media a lot on that. Also, as I say, stretching their offer into the breakfast time. There's a big focus on breakfast time in the States at the moment. Like Dunkin' Donuts focuses on coffee. America runs on Dunkin'. They know that if they get people in for coffee, they'll buy other products there. McDonald's, as I say, started offering oatmeal in the morning. So, you know, they're really trying to stretch the amount of time people can come in. And the whole area of healthy, natural, reduced calorie offers. So again, like the McDonald's, and again, we probably would have seen it here, offering smaller sizes of their offers. So little slider burgers or little smaller wraps. So again, putting up calorific information. And that's become an issue in the States as well, in a number of the states. If you're in New York or California, if you've got more than 20 outlets in your chain, you have to write up your calorific content on your menu. But the word seems to be so far that even though it's been like that in New York for over a year now, it hasn't made a huge difference on how consumers are actually, what they're choosing. So it's a bit like, you know, wow, that's 600 calories for a slice of that cake. Okay, that's interesting. I'll have that slice of cake. You know, they're still they're aware of it, and they're way more aware of it. But at least but they're still, it's not changing the habit. Now, what I put up this slide for, the US route to market, the reason I put this up here is because, you know, because it is such a faraway market, route to market is one of the biggest challenges over there, and you really need to understand what's involved in getting your product to the end consumer. So as I say, I just thought that this would be very useful. It does have margin figures in there, but bear in mind, these are broad brushstroke margins because obviously it depends on the category, whether it's chilled, frozen, ambient, whether it's in a mature category, whether there's a lot of existing domestic suppliers in there, or whether it's very much an imported area. So as I say, bear all of that in mind, but it gives you an idea. Okay, so you're starting off here over in Ireland as the exporter, as the producer. So coming into the US, you need an importer. Somebody who is going to do as your paperwork and take responsibility for your products when it comes over to the States. And bear in mind, in here as well, you've got your cost of product coming into the States. So it leaves your factory in Ireland, and you get it up as far as Dublin. You then need to get a shipper to send it over the 3,000 miles. He'll typically go from Ireland maybe to Rotterdam or over to a port in the UK. Then it goes to one of the various ports, predominantly on the east coast from this side of the world. Obviously, New Jersey is a big landing area from the state for the east coast. And bear in mind, time can differ, but it will be somewhere around 3 to 5 weeks. 3 weeks from the time it leaves Ireland till the time it gets to the UK, weather permitting, Obviously, different times of the year, winter time, all of that, it could take up to 5 weeks. So that's typically what they would say. It lands, so you've got your cost of shipping, and again, it depends if it's ambient, frozen, or chilled. Some people, if the product can take it, will often do air freighting, but it's usually for small volume product, and if it's something that is very fresh and needs to get somewhere fast. Or, so as I say, but it can be, it's usually not a long-term solution. And then because obviously it's another market, you have importation duties, which you wouldn't be used to if you're exporting into the EU. So you also have tariffs and they're all dependent on your product and your category. So you've got those costs, and you get it as far as the US port. And then you need an importer to take in your product and process it on the US side. And there has to be some kind of importer of record. This is part of doing business in the US. The importer can sell on then to a distributor. Or in many cases, a distributor is also an importer. The larger distributors tend to be an importer as well. There are some people that are purely importers alone, and they just have warehouses, and then they sell on to distributors. So they don't have trucks and wheels and all of that. But as I say, distributors, many of them are typically importers. So if you're ever dealing with somebody, ask them, are they an importer of record? If a distributor comes and asks you to take in your product. And the distributor then will obviously sell on to the retailer or food service customers, the same principle on the food service side of things in general. Because of the sheer size of the market, it's rare that one distributor that all of your business is just going neatly through from you into an importer stroke distributor and onto the retailer. The distributor will then also sell on to other distributors, because if they're based on the East Coast, and somebody wants your product on the West Coast, they'll then sell on to a distributor that services the West Coast. So think of each of the markets each of the states of almost having your own distributor within at least that state or the couple of states around it. So there will be a number of links in the chain. And everybody's taken a cut on top of, and each one is cumulative. So the point being, that by the time it gets to the consumer, an imported product has had all of the shipping costs, the tariffs, the importer stroke distributor margin, the retailer margin, and then it's on the shelf. The reason I go through this, and as I say, these are very broad brush strokes, but it's good, it'll give you a good idea, a good sense. The reason I give you this is there is undoubtedly a market for every one of your products in the States. Or there is demand, or I should say there's an opportunity. But whether you can do it and make money is what it really boils down to. And whenever you're dealing with us, we will constantly say, and I'll constantly say to you, what is your point of difference? If you are going to be a Me Too, like the wonderful products that are available across the States. I mean, it's a wonderful continent. It's got every type of growing facility and, like regionality and small rural areas and local and big factories and, everything. It's got everything that we've got here in Europe. If you are just a Me Too, as good as, what is available in the market, you will not be able to compete with them because they will not have had all of the extra pricing complications that you will have in. So you need to have a point of difference that justifies inevitably your premium price. That's the bottom line. And the reason we ask you to go through this is when somebody is really interested in the market, I say, let's sense check it. Let's go and do an audit for you. We'll go into the stores and we'll find out who are the competitors, what's their pack size, and what's their pricing on shelf. Then let's do a rough costing. And if you're coming out at twice the price of the average of your competitive set, and you don't have anything that is really, really different, a selling feature, a story that's really, really consumer focused and will make them pay that extra money, then I would be saying, honestly, focus your time and energy on a market where you will get the return for your investment. So, you know, I don't mean to be negative, and that's not what it's about, but I am about being realistic. And what I want to avoid any of you doing is having the same conversation year in, year out, or going back and forth to the market and 3 years later wondering why you're not gaining traction, why you are just in the same point. So, and this comes from watching the case studies of other imported products, watching other successful Irish brands that are out there. And I mean, people will say, look at how well Kerrygold is doing in the US. They're the #1 imported butter into the US at the moment. They are servicing all of the top 20 retailers. Their Dubliner cheese and their cheese range is I'm seeing it now, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Kroger's. I mean, you know, it's wonderful, and it's wonderful to see it out there. Kerrygold have been there for 15 years at this stage. They have a team of about 30 dedicated people in the market. They're their Irish sales team. And they own a distribution company that they bought for $1 million and whatever. That is the reason that it is. So, you know, you've got to be realistic about the market. But, you know, there still is the opportunity. And this is what I would say for you. And I'll talk a little bit more about the specialty area perhaps as well. You know, we talk about what are the 5 must-haves for the US market. And this is from my experience and my best advice to you. You need to have a knowledge of your competitive set over there and your point of difference, as I've just said, and for the reasons I've just explained. And really what that involves, I would say to you, is you have to go into the market. If somebody says, I wanted to sell to the US, no, I've never come and visited the market, I'd say, first thing, get yourself on a flight, get, you know, one of the deals when they're going, come over for 4 days, we'll give you a store itinerary, you go around. Because of the English language, it's great. You can go in, you can talk to people, you can you can read the labels, you know, you can really get a really good set of a sense of the market. And I promise you, at the end of those 4 days, you'll know whether there's a market for you there or not, because you'll see, as I say, where the market's at and what the pricing is at. As I've said, get your pricing and route to market in place in an ideal world. If you're dealing with any even distributor, let alone a retailer or a food service operator, you know, if they think your product is great, again, the first thing they'll ask is, so what kind of pricing are we talking about? And at that point, you can't go, you know, leave that with me, I'll sort it out. You know, you can kind of figure it out your landed, they'll even say, what's your landed price? What's it as far as getting it to the port? And then they can kind of calculate in their head what they think the margins will be after that. And as I say, ideally have your route to market in place. I mean, if you're dealing with a retailer, it's great when you can say, look, I'm already available from X, Y, or Z distributor. But, you know, like everything, it's not one size suits all. And if you've got a good enough retailer that thinks that you are great and wants you, they will tell you what distributor to work with. All of the retailers have a preferred distributor, somebody that's doing most of their business. If a retailer really, really likes your product, they can actually make it happen that if you get it to the port, they can get your distributor, their distributor, to carry it for them. And distributors will like you coming along and saying, can I do business with you? Wegmans have said they want my product. They've asked that I talk to you about distribution. And believe you me, the distributor will say, grand, because now there's a market, there's an existing customer there. Do bear in mind with distributors, and if you're dealing with them, the reality of it is a lot of distributors are just wheels. They will deliver your product beautifully. They will deliver it to order. They will deliver it in the right quantities. They will deliver the wonderful paperwork. They will invoice it correctly. But in many cases, even though they've got a sales team, they will not sell your product because they could have anything from 500 to 5,000 SKUs. And they will promote the products that are putting money behind their products, are incentivizing their reps. So just bear that in mind. You know, your product really has either got to jump off the shelves or else you've got to be there to make your product move. Or else, as I say, in 3 years' time, you'll be wondering why it isn't still moving. The other thing to bear in mind in the US is a completely different market with its own sets of food rules and regulations. Again, nothing more challenging than you have to do with the EU, but at the same time, you've got to be aware of that. You cannot sell into the USA unless you have FDA registration, which is an online registration, but you have to have it. And just bear this in mind when you think of the US, and probably timely in the last couple of weeks and that, food is seen as a bioterrorism threat in the US. Since 9/11, they see food as an area that could actually be tampered with by terrorists in order to do harm to the population. So food, of everything that is coming into the States, it is hugely regulated. So you have to have prior notification, you have to tell them when a product's coming in. You have to do all of that online. You have to follow, the States is very bureaucratic. If you don't tick all the boxes and do the paperwork the way they want it, your product goes nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. So you have to have your registration, which is online. You have to notify them that it's coming in. You have to be aware of their food safety systems and certifications. You have to have American compliant labels. The product has to have ounces on it. It has to have its nutrition label the way they want it. I would say to you, the US is a wonderful market, but it's challenging. I would say to anybody, I'd be worried if it's your first export experience, because you have to deal with all of these things and exchange rate and the vast size of the market. It is not the market to cut your teeth on in terms of exports. Get your export experience from somewhere like the UK. And also, if you do well there, that actually has clout when you deal with the US customers as well. And as I said, it does take time and focus and money if you're in a very competitive category. All of this a presentation will be available to you. So 5 things to know. It can take from 3 to 7 years to gain traction, but it is a very, very rewarding market once you're there. They're very loyal. The trade is very, very loyal. You don't have to have technically or typically the same amount of turnover or rotation on shelf as you would have over here. They really will work with you, but you need to knock on their door maybe 3, 4, 5 times before they think you'll be serious. So, a huge amount of time up front. You need to be over there 3 to 4 times a year yourself if you're really serious. Out with your distributor, out with their reps. But if you get established, you'll be there in 20 years' time. It's a great market that way. They want to know the story. They love Ireland and the heritage and the story and the people and the ingredients, all of that kind of stuff. They do see Ireland as a tremendous credentials around a source of quality supply. We use the likes of Kerrygold to demonstrate that to them, and other products, particularly in the drinks industry. Just bear in mind, Thanksgiving and Christmas means that November and December pretty well are right off and everybody's gone on vacation in August. And as I said, food importation is getting increasingly difficult, and so you can't really kind of fly under the radar anymore, that perhaps in the past Irish products could go in with distributors that, would have EU labels. Now, just to let you know, for Marketplace, we are targeting a spread of customers to come in from the US. Everybody, as I said, like from the natural product retailers to the specialty ones, to, again, very importantly, distributors, because if they're there, as I say, they're definitely an important part of it. And then those people that actually very much service the the Irish-born community. And then for alcoholic beverage, which is a whole other type of buyer in the US. But bear in mind, when I'm asking somebody to come in from the US, they're thinking of a week out of their business, because it's 2 days flight. It's a day at Marketplace, and they're going to want to kind of spend a day going around the market or whatever. Getting people to take a week out of the office in the States is hugely challenging. They'll often, they just, in many cases, just won't do it or won't be allowed to do it. So, we are always struggling with people coming in from the US. But what I use it as is it allows me to flag up and promote Ireland. And sometimes, even if they won't fly there, it means that I might say to them, well, look, can I come in to you with a range of products? And, having you know, having cut me down in terms of not coming to Ireland, often then they'll open the door in order for us to actually be able to go in. So it usually gives us an entree in to the market as well. And as I said, there's two of us in the New York office. Exactly like any of the rest of our colleagues in Bord Bia, you know, our email is fairly straightforward for anybody working in Bord Bia. Our telephone number is there as well. You know, as I said to you, just realise that it is a wonderful but very challenging market. You need to be seriously committed. You need to understand the market. You need to know your points of difference. You need to have your pricing right to know whether there's a market for you. But if you've got a will and a half and a commitment, you know, we'll absolutely do whatever we can to find the opportunity for you there and to lead you in the right direction, to give you a sense of where are the markets, where are the regions, who are the distributors. But there's the things I've talked about here today are the things that you can have ready for us before you talk to us, so that we can take it from there and see where the opportunities are. Thank you.